Hey, Matt from Hidden Machine here with another Alan Wake 2 preview, breakdown, analysis type video. Again, if you are someone who is trying to avoid spoilers, don't watch this. We're gonna get into some wild stuff. I'm pretty excited about it, but like I talked to a lot of people online who are like, oh, I don't really want to know too much. They're going whole hog, all right? I mean, there's gonna be plenty of surprises left to find in the game for sure. Remedy's not gonna blow their proverbial load before release date, but there is some pretty crazy stuff. So if you are just checking this video out, you know, because you're kind of curious about what it's gonna be about, it's gonna get into some spoilery stuff. So if you didn't watch this new 11 minutes of gameplay that premiered this week on IGN, go ahead, check out one of our older videos. We got a huge back catalog. We'll eventually put up some videos that are not so spoiler heavy, but for now, this is what we're getting into. So before we go too deep, I wanna say thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel over on Patreon. Even $1 a month goes a very long way for myself and Mr. Jordan Hill and everyone else involved with Hidden Machine. Keeps it going. You know, there are costs, believe it or not, for sitting in your room and talking to a camera. Anyway, let's get into this new video. 11 minutes from an early mission in Saga Anderson's campaign. The video starts off in Watery, and right off the bat, there is a lot to take in. As Saga gets out of her car, we can see that she has a head wound. And this is similar to the head wound that Alan had in the first game, which is in turn similar to a head wound that Max Payne had in Max Payne 2. And honestly, as I see more and more of Alan Wake 2 in these previews, I see more and more elements that are very reminiscent of the Max Payne series. I'm in the middle of making a video about that goes deeper into that topic, so stay tuned if you want to hear more about Max Payne being sort of the roots of the RCU. I'm guessing that this footage occurs after that initial boss fight with Nightingale that we've heard about in other previews and we saw a few glimpses of, mostly because, you know, she didn't have the head wound back then and she does now, but there's also a few other context clues in this video that suggest it's a little bit later, probably, you know, it's still an early mission in the game, but after the stuff we've already seen. Now, please forgive me if I'm not doing great with the pronunciation of these Finnish words. I'm looking them up, I'm using the Google Translate to hear the pronunciation, I'm watching videos of Finnish people speaking the language and trying to get it, but honestly, this stuff escapes me for some reason. I struggle enough to speak my own language, but when we get out of the car, we see a sign that says Suomi Hall, which was established in 1862. Suomi is what Finland is called inside of Finland, and according to everything I've read so far, there's no real definitive answer as to the origins of that name, but there are a lot of really interesting theories regarding it. We don't know exactly when Bright Falls was established, but one of the very first important things in the recorded history of that area is the opening of the Bright Falls coal mine in 1878. If this building was established 16 years prior to that, I get the impression that Watery might be much older than Bright Falls, but I can't say that conclusively. It just seems that way from what we know about the history of Bright Falls as is described to us throughout Alan Wake and in the Alan Wake files. There's also a person here who is campaigning for who I think is Mayor Setter. I'm doing my best to read this here, but it's a little blurry for me. It's unclear if the person is the mayor himself or just a supporter, but it is interesting to see a bit of the local politics illustrated here. There's also a business called the Laughing Naki, and in Finnish mythology, Naki is a type of demonic djinn, which is basically a sort of spirit that can take on several different forms. They live in water and they pull people down under to drown them, which, you know, sounds very fitting to some of the themes of Alan Wake and the Dark Place and all that stuff, but also we are seeing a lot of Finnish culture and folklore and mythology and art and everything in this game, so expect to see a lot more of that kind of Finnish stuff going forward. As Saga enters the hall, she passes a bus with the word Valhalla written on it. I have to assume that this is a bus from the Valhalla nursing home and that it brings the residents into town for day trips. The hall is dimly lit, so there's not a ton of details we can make out, but there's a stage at the far end of the room where A.T. from Control is performing a song. A person on Reddit going by Borsakowski posted their transcription and translation of these lyrics, which read, "A bloody mouth twists into a grimace. The cork is lost from the bottle of booze. He can only hear the rattle of the knife sheath. It's nightless night, it eats away light. It's nightless night, it eats away hope." The lyrics here strike me as likely being a reference to the duality between Mr. Scratch and Alan Wake. Alan's drinking problems, Mr. Scratch, the killer, but also nightless night is a phrase that keeps coming up in these early Alan Wake previews. Nightless night is another Finnish thing. There's a phenomenon that happens in certain places of high altitudes where there are periods where the sun won't go down below the horizon for weeks at a time. Nightless Night is also the name of a Thomas Zane film that we've seen advertised on posters and in other previews of the game. In the last batch of gameplay previews that we saw, Alan Wake made reference to the janitor appearing to him in the dark place. And this is all giving credence to the idea that A.T. is a very powerful being who can seemingly cross dimensions at will. I want to note that there's a person knitting here, and I wonder if this is related to that concept art that we saw a long while back. Perhaps this person is a resident at the Valhalla nursing home and we'll eventually see them become taken? We'll have to wait and see, but there is some stuff in this batch of gameplay footage that suggests that as Saga explores these different locations, they've become sort of infested by the dark presence or by the Taken, and people who previously occupied those places have changed. And we'll see how deep that goes, but we've seen a couple clips of what we assume is Saga Anderson fighting some sort of Taken individual, possibly Cynthia Weaver, in the Valhalla nursing home. The idea of a bunch of crazed, dark presence possessed senior citizens sounds pretty wild, so we'll see how that turns out, eventually. Next, we see a clip of Saga approaching Elmo and Jaakko Koskela. These are twin brothers played by a Finnish actor named Peter Franzen. Elmo introduces the pair, and then they say,
I miss that Anderson sense of humor. It's great to see you again, Saga. Yeah, super nice to see you again, Saga.
Now, Saga doesn't believe that she's actually met these people, and this sort of treatment is very similar to what Alan Wake experienced at the Oh Dear Diner when he first ran into the Anderson brothers. I can't say for sure what's going on here. Of course, this is a lot of speculation, but something about the Anderson brothers recognizing Alan Wake, Saga Anderson being recognized by these two twin brothers who don't look exactly like the Anderson brothers, but one is a little more clean shaven, one has a full beard. There is a bit of similarity between these characters, and there's a definite echo between these situations. Saga is asking herself, is the story affecting their memories, or is it possibly an effect of the cult, or is it a combination of both of those things? That's part of the mystery that we're yet to unravel. And I did see Thomas Pua on Twitter mention that there were a lot of manuscript pages removed from this gameplay preview, and that this mission in particular is very lore heavy. So they're teasing us. There is a bigger mystery here that, we're intentionally not getting all the pieces, but it's fun to get a glimpse at what is being built. Saga mentions that other people around town are claiming to remember her and know her. And again, while we can't say for sure what's happening, I suspect she's experiencing some sort of AWE. We can also see here that Saga has different dialogue options, which is pretty exciting. Elmo is the owner of the Watery Lighthouse Trailer Park, and he welcomes Saga back to it, saying that she used to live there with her daughter. As she ponders this, we see a piece of evidence show up, as if Saga is mentally collecting notes for her board in the Mind Place. And it turns out that that's exactly what she's doing. She has a list of people here on her desk that she can profile. On the left, we see the Bookers. The person in this portrait appeared in an earlier gameplay clip, but we still don't really know their story. We can also see portraits of Nightingale and Alan Wake. Saga then has visions of the brothers talking to one another, They say that she is one of them, and they seem to regard her as an important member of their community. Saga is trying to get the keys to her trailer there at the trailer park, but she's informed that the keys are in a safe at Coffee World, and I believe that Elmo is also the owner of Coffee World. He says he'll call ahead so that someone can get the keys out of the safe for her. A little quest tracker type thing shows up in the top left corner here, and we can see that one of Saga's goals is to look for the clicker in Watery. I'm very curious to find out how the clicker got there. Elmo is a member of a local motorcycle club called the Kalevala Knights, and that's Knights with a K, like a soldier. The Kalevala is one of the most important works of Finnish literature. It's an epic poem from the early 1800s, it's a story about the creation of the earth, and it's a formative part of Finland's national identity. Ilmari is a mythological blacksmith who is a character in the Kalevala, and he's immortal and he can craft anything, and that name, Ilmari, showed up on the Nightless Knights movie poster. It's still unclear if this is a totally new character or if this is possibly an alias for another character that we already know, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, this is all information that I'm kind of just gleaning from multiple sources. I'm really not versed in Finnish culture or Finnish mythology or anything like that in any way at all. But Remedy has said many times that they are putting a lot of their national identity into this game, so I think that if you can get a crash course on some of this Finnish mythology stuff, especially the Kalevala, it'd probably offer a lot of clarity while you're playing Alan Wake 2. Next we see Saga walking the trail to Coffee World, which she has to take because the road there is flooded. This makes me think of the old Return teaser from Quantum Break, which featured the phrase, Flood of Darkness. I really get the impression that the waters of Cauldron Lake are spilling out beyond the parameters of the lake and affecting nearby areas. Saga gets into some combat here. There's a Splitter taken, which was an enemy type that we first saw introduced in Alan Wake's American Nightmare. The damage that these enemies take is absolutely brutal. You can see exposed intestines and very realistic bullet wounds and blood. The game is gonna get gruesome for sure. At one point, Saga uses her crossbow, and it appears to be a one-shot kill if you get a headshot with this. And the reload animation is super cool. It seems like she's putting all her strength into it, and seems like a big sort of risk-reward thing using the crossbow at all, but man, it looks sick. I'm really looking forward to playing with that. We can also see a bit of the inventory system here, and it looks pretty similar to something like the more recent Resident Evil games. There's a grid to place your items on, and we can see that Saga can equip, I think, up to 3 charms, which I don't really know what those charms will do. Sometimes they give you a little bit of a stat boost, an extra ability, sometimes they're a debuff. It's kind of just, gameplay modifiers. It seems like maybe a different take on the sort of mod system from Control, but also it's something that is in the more recent Resident Evil games. When Saga arrives at Coffee World, it's seemingly been abandoned, but it turns out that the people that were there have become taken. Saga is uncertain if this is the effects of the story or if it's the cult, but, it's another mystery that we're gonna try to figure out. During her time here, she gets into a battle with some Taken on a teacup ride, and there's a really cool illustration of destructible environments. I'm really looking forward to the possibility of more destructible environments throughout Alan Wake 2. It was one of my favorite parts of Control, and even going back to the first Max Payne game, Remedy's always had really impressive particle effects and interactivity with objects, and seeing that kind of grow and become more realistic and more visually impressive over time is just super exciting. This gameplay preview ends with Saga retrieving a screwdriver and using it to jimmy open the lock to the gift shop so that she can retrieve her keys. And that's pretty much it. Although we only saw a few bits and pieces of the game here, there's a lot to chew on. Seeing Ahti is very exciting, especially seeing him in this context where the attendees at the performance seem to know him. And that sort of performance is something that's very reminiscent of Twin Peaks and Silent Hill, seeing that sort of singer in the dark hall kind of thing. It's a really great trope, and I've been told over and over again, you gotta watch Twin Peaks, you gotta watch Twin Peaks. I started watching Twin Peaks. I knew it was a huge influence on these games, on the Alan Wake series, but seeing the show does offer a little bit more clarity into some of the creative decisions in Alan Wake, if that makes sense. I also want to note that for me, the outdoor scene there in Watery, just as she's walking into the hall, is very reminiscent of something like Silent Hill 2, and there's a great just atmosphere to that whole section. I'm really excited to explore that some more. You can see as she's moving around, there's options to interact with all sorts of items and NPCs. There's going to be a lot of stuff in this game. It seems like it will be very dense. Every time we get a new gameplay preview, I'm like, they didn't interact with that thing. What is that over there? You know, there's lots of text to read. It seems like it's going to be a lot of fun for people who are really into digging into the little details. I also know for sure that there is a lot more coming in terms of previews leading up to the release of this game. The team over at Remedy has repeatedly made reference to, hey, hold on, there's a lot more. We want people to really get to know this game. Stay tuned. So I'll continue making updates as they come, but in the meantime, I would say take a look at some of that Finnish mythology and folklore stuff. Think about the meta being told here. The name Saga itself is even kind of a double meaning. So there's a lot going on. It's not going to be something that we can piece together entirely before the game comes out, obviously. But for me, as someone who's, obsessed with trying to unravel some of the Remedy mysteries, I think that having any sort of foreknowledge going into those games or even going into looking at these gameplay previews is super beneficial. So anyway, meet me down in the comments if you want to chat some more about this, or hit us up on the Hidden Machine Discord. Some of the info that I shared here is stuff that we've been talking about in the Discord. So if you want to be a part of all that, hop on. We're very friendly, all right? And until next time, see ya!